And so what about the CCRC?
I don't know the answer to your question. But my gut reaction to it is we have a zone for CCRC. That CCRC zone has a lot of criteria in it. Most of the people who are going to be developing in the CRC zone with assisted living facilities or anything else are not going to be the problem children of the healthcare world. They're going to be people who probably meet most of this criteria with the exception of the nonprofit corporation, because Marriott is not a nonprofit corporation. But I would cheerfully welcome Marriott to put one of their facilities anywhere they want to in town. Now, you get to the special use permit part, maybe we have some wiggle room in there. If you want to specifically say that professional development companies that do this type of work, such as, and give a name, in that zoning, then we might be able to wiggle around it. But I think he's given us enough room to move around.
Why do we need to include those organizations in this ordinance if we already have a separate zoning classification for them?
I didn't say included in this ordinance. What I'm saying is.
I mean, why can't we just remove them from the inclusion of this ordinance?
If we have somebody who's coming in for an RHOP zoning, I think that's so specialized, you could say RHOP is not covered by this. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not the lawyer in the room. I'm just talking about it from a land use standpoint. A residential use is a residential use is a residential use.
Right, but the RHOP and the CCRC, we've already determined in our zoning ordinance, they can't go into residential areas, it's a special zoning, so they wouldn't require.
They wouldn't be in this.
Right.
So they're not gonna be coming in for a special use
Right.
permit. So I never thought about how it would impact them because they won't ever be doing this. They're not operating a care home usually. They are a business that is operating a medical facility in the assisted care living. I'll split the bread with you all evening if you want to.
Can we entertain a motion to postpone this till the next council meeting so we can look at the CCRC?
I'll make that motion.
What is it we need to look at? I mean, I guess
I think the essence of the question is there something in this ordinance that would affect a group, a development group, like a Marriott assisted living? If they came in, would they be able to go into the RHOP districts? Because the RHOP districts aren't districts that the personal care homes and the CLAs are going in. It's a totally different district. So I don't see it touching it, but I think we should give Tony time to look at it and see if it does.
That sounds Tony.
Me either.
Well, you know, if there's an imminent application for a CCRC, I'd probably put it off. But I'd really recommend that you go ahead and pass the ordinance. And if we've got an issue with CCRCs, then we can take that up and remove and amend out of that if there's a question about it. Would be my recommendation to you.
The ordinance
Just because
defines CCRC specifically in it.
and it's just because we've got a whole bunch of other things we're trying to regulate, and putting it in place, to me, we've been on moratorium for a year. If there is something in that definition, we do define we define continuing care retirement community under the state definition as being included in collective residences. If that were if we have another zoning class where we took that out of collective residences and pushed it over, it would just be deleting that term. If there are other conflicts, we can take a look at them and amend those definitions out, but they're very limited places where that term, it's really in the definition of collective residences is the only place that's gonna come into play. And so it's deleting.
So it doesn't have that, it's in definition, but there's no bearing on the rest of your ordinance.
Right.
It does, it says that the CCRC shall comply with these.
Oh, it does, there's no question about it.
It affects all
And if-
CCRCs that would want to open. It's not just a definition.
If that were, we're gonna be coming back for action under whichever version you wanna deal with, but the editing to the CCRC is just one it's in the definition of collective residences, and it lists that name. If it's already regulated in a different area because it's a different use, it's the deletion of that term from this definition is the adjustment. But, you know, I mean, it's just an issue that hadn't come up. You know, planning commission's reviewed it, we've been doing it for a long time. And,
But why don't we pass it tonight with the deletion? Okay, and then look at that, and if there's something we put back in, we'll put it back in, at least we'll have an ordinance.
okay. And that modification, if you make that one, it's in the collective residences definition on page 2. And it says
You tell me if you did.
CCRC, continuing care, community. You would delete that one. On page 2, it's the top section in the definition.
First paragraph.
It's actually continuing care retirement community, continuing care retirement community independent living unit, and community care retirement community assisted living facility and skilled nursing facility. Because we allow for all of those in our ordinance.
Okay. So that would just be, their 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 definitions where the term CCRC is utilized on the 4th line from the top of the 2nd page.
Now, if I want to come in with a CCRC after this ordinance is passed, what do I need to do?
It won't be come to this section. You know, I guess you'd be applying under the other class.
Everything under the other class. And we're covered there.
It would not be, you're deleting, so your CCRCs would not be allowed in residential districts under the change. It would eliminate that completely because the conditional uses go away, the special uses come in, and the only thing that's allowed under the special use are collective residences, and that would no longer fall within the definition.
Other questions? New business, RFP for Oak Road Park. Mr. Sanders?
We have items I'd like to hand out, which shows the original master plan of the Oak Road Park and the proposed RFP, which would be the first step to clearing property. You can see that the proposed RFP follows the outline of the original master plan. And we would be asking for bids on 3 services. The invasive species removal in the larger area, the clearing of the proposed trail area, removing all vegetation on a 10-foot wide strip, and clearing of the smaller trees, less than 24 inches DBH, diameter breast high, within the smaller area that HDR originally called the lawn area. And I think it's smart to proceed with this RFP.
Questions for Mr. Sanders?
No, I asked to bring this forward because of the funds that we found in this SPOS, and the fact that this would give us a chance to get that park started and get it off the ground and see how it gets used. I think it's just a good thing to get started. We've been promised for a lot of years, and we have a good building now, but we should do it.
Mr. so what was the amount that was found in the parks? Was that 1.5 million or 1.7 million? I know one was parks and one was public works, you know?
Excuse me?
The 2009 money in the parks, was that 1.5 or 1.7?
The remaining balance of the two SPLOS, 05 and 09, the combined balances in recreation, it is 2.176 million.
And what's the benefit to doing this, an RFP with just the preliminary stages and not our RFP for the master plan in general?
Well, because of the, I guess several of the factors that are surrounding the park with lack of pedestrian access to the park. The fact that we really do not have an updated number for any of the improvements. At least the RFP, the responses to the RFP will give us an idea of what it will cost to do the initial clearing to see what we have out there. When I went out there in the wintertime, I thought this is gonna be easy, no problem. And I think I told you, after going back with Lisa and the Public Works folks, obviously, there's a lot of work to be done out there. It's not in the best of shape. And I know that you probably want to coordinate several different projects. We received an update, for instance, on Phase 2B at the park recently. That project update came to about $1.8 million. That was an item that was on the Parks and Recreation list. So in trying to balance everything, it's like I said last time, whether it's the first step or the first of 10, this needs to be done. So,
So we've only really got about $390,000.
well,
If you take out
yeah,
phase 2B.
phase, you know, that's about where we are. I mean, if we're at 2.176 and we're very close to 1.8 for 2B, then that's.
So that's gonna be $1 million project, I'm trying to guarantee.
I can't tell you that. I just know that it'd be good to get started. I know you've had a lot of conversations with
I think it's just,
the
it's
property
good.
owners out there.
Just,
What is phase 2B? What did that become?
Phase 2B was the softball complex. It was the next step in the master plan at Briscoe after the soccer field. And soccer field and that parking has been completed, and that's. Now, I was not here when all this planning went on, and it's. You can steer me in another direction, but that's the direction I had taken from the documentation that I could find with the 09 SPLOS.
Are these in the priority? This baseball park you're talking about, is that, I can't remember if it's happened to be a priority project that we had set forth versus looking at this new master plan?
Well, it
If
was.
we have to move them in the pecking order, how would that be?
I can tell you that I have found 4 or 5 different lists, Mr. Smog, on the various projects. And they included this memo, for instance, one of the latest memos I could find from Lisa's predecessor. Number 1 was $4.5 million engineering construction for phase 2 of the Briscoe Park master plan. Oak Road was number 2, $600,000 engineering and construction for Oak Road Park. And then, there's an estimate that obviously needs to be updated. That is right around $740,000 for Oak Road. So, like I said, you could send me in another direction, but that's the result of my research that I have so far. so.
Well, I'll ask Lisa the question later on. I know the fields are being used at Bristol, and the number of enrollments are on the rise, and I'm sure that we can use every possible inch in the park to get everybody active and working. Is any of these fields out there at this point in time, are they unworkable?
Well, as part of our ongoing discussion, we also talked to HDR, that really, my experience with them has been very good. They did a very good job. I came in, when the project had already started, the soccer field project. I see no reason to change engineering firms. They brought the project in on time, on budget, and I think they've got a good feel for the park. And one thing we've asked them to do is give us an estimate also on updating the master plan. I know we've talked about potentially utilizing the property out there that we do have in an updated way, letting mayor and council and the community to have a new voice on, where do we go master plan wise with the park. One of the things on the list that came up, we're talking about $3.5 million engineering and construction for phase 3. I think, phase 3 needs to be updated with that master plan. We may need, we may need open space, we may need open fields, we may need a turf field. It's just to be determined. So I've taken what I felt like was the minimum that we could accomplish with the remaining money, and then we're planning for the future with updating the master plan.
$2.17 million, that's what you have for parcel records? Is that what you
Correct.
said?
The balance remaining in the transportation SPOS funds.
I don't see I don't see the, well, the question is, what is, in your projection, or maybe the numbers that you have, how much money do you think we need to spend on fixing the baseball field and move on with that direction? What are we looking at that money, how much money would be talking about?
The updated cost on 2B, which
Another one you're talking about.
is the 1.7, $1,784,000.
178.
When we do an RFP, do we put parameters as far as prices are concerned, or are we seeing what it will cost us?
Seeing what it would cost us. And normally, the RFP goes out, and the mayor and council takes action once the numbers come back in.
And so if we do the RFP and it comes more than we thought or less than we thought, we're under no obligation to go with all
Not
of
at
it
all.
or some of it or anything like that?
Not at all. Can reject all bids, and that's a part of every RFP.
Other questions? That brings us into item C, approval of the order for declaratory judgment. Mr. Powell?
This is the requirement under the new sunshine law of adopting all our settlements in the public setting. And this is the consent order that's been signed off on by our opponent, Mr. George Anderson, Ms. Creek, and seeking to have that read into the record of your public meeting and approved. With that, I do have a recommendation to lay on the table for first read, modification that's consistent with the order of the procedure that's in it. The mayor sort of raised this issue at the last meeting with regard to procedurally making sure that the legislative and judicial functions were consistent with each other. And this first read for that ordinance would accomplish that. And y'all recall the procedure. There are 2 criteria for determining whether an ethics violation is a cognizable claim. It sets out those criteria. You have to cite to a specific code section and provide facts that support that. as a matter of preliminary dismissal, the city attorney and the city manager would be the ones who did that initial review to determine if it was cognizable. There would be an appeal right for citizens if in fact, that was error, the Superior Court would have the ability to review that. So, other than that, I just ask that it be approved so we can complete the tasks that y'all gave us to do with regard to eliminating frivolous ethics violations.
Questions from Mr. Powell? That brings us to our work session agenda. We have a policy governing use of city facilities for nonprofit groups. I asked that we put on our agenda tonight. If you remember, in the last council meeting, I asked Ms. Bender about resigning her position from the Snellville Entrepreneur Council, and the response was that that was a nonprofit organization. The Snellville Entrepreneur Council uses city property. They use the conference room for all of their meetings. And the events that Ms. Bender quoted as the SEC planning and organizing and being SEC events, they use the city hall community room for those events. They have not been charged for any of those things. You may remember a few meetings ago, we had representatives from the Overcomers House, which is a nonprofit organization here in Snellville, asking us for use of the town green. And council, they could not afford the fees associated with using the town green, and council took no action as far as waiving any of those fees. They've since put in a request to use the community room. They can afford the rental fees associated with the community room. So I think we've set a precedent by allowing the SEC to use our facilities as a nonprofit without charging them, that we need to set a policy up so that when other nonprofits come in, they have the same access and the same fee requirements. So I'm asking staff to put together a policy to put back on our next work session agenda.
We did skip the attorney's report, but and there were two questions that, and this has to do with your subject matter. This is the answer to the question about Ms. Bender and the code sections that go with that. And then there was the other question that came out of the meeting was the one concerning amending the agenda and the Open Meetings Act. And I just wanted to make sure everybody got. I didn't want that work to go wasted.
Okay, so back to my, you need to continue?
No, that's it.
Okay. Just based on what you're saying, I mean, I don't think we turned people down to green because of the rental fee. There was some other problem with that, wasn't it? They had to get the police and
They had their
they have to
insurance,
do-
they had everything,
they
they
had the
couldn't afford
police.
to pay the costs associated with usage, but that's a separate issue, we'll deal with the town green rental, usage later, but for tonight's purposes, what I put on here is use of city hall property.
Okay,
We have organizations that are using the conference room and the community room that are nonprofits free of charge, and we're charging other organizations, so I think we need to come up with a policy to devise, so that any nonprofit that comes in here is getting the same benefit.
Well, do we not have a rule, or I guess it's a rule, I've always used it, if a nonprofit wanted to use the community room, as long as a member of the council sponsored it and was here for the event, they could use it. That was a part of the benefits of being on council, being able to help them out on nonprofits and police like that. Am I wrong?
I'm not sure, did that cover the community room or this room here?
No, council, they
It
can
wasn't.
sponsor events and.
The community room has been doing that for the 4 years I've been on council. I know it was done many years before that. So I think that any
I
the
don't
green's
think-
another different deal. I agree, but
I don't think that there's actually anything in writing as far as that, so I'm asking staff to put together a written policy, and to bring it back on our next work session
For
agenda.
City Hall,
For
this
City Hall.
facility here.
but I just want to make sure that it's in there, that any nonprofit wants to use city facilities inside City Hall, that if they have a sponsorship of a councilman that's willing to be here, then there's no charge.
The issue with the green, as far as I can recall, is there is city expense to it. It's not just a matter of opening the door and turning on the lights. You have to have insurance, police. So I think the green takes a different policy than inside City Hall.
And I'm not asking, tonight's agenda item is for the community, is addressing the community room, usage and conference room. That brings us then to item B, amendment to section 2.19 of the charter. Mr. Powell or Councilman Kraus?
Mr. Powell?
We handed those out last meeting, and really the change is that you have registered email addresses where notices would go out to, and that, in order to make that, it's a charter change, so we would have to go through the home rule exercise. I just want to make sure y'all like the language before we start and really a nod that we can start the process of advertising it and bring it back for your vote. That's what y'all want. Yes, sir.
I love email. I mean, you know, we moved into the 21st century, and that's, everybody does, most everybody does smartphone, communicate that way, and that's how we be informed. Sending an email is I know what you're with it. I think it could be a good practice. However, in the past, it so happened that we had meetings where I had to dial into these conferences. To send me an email 24 hours away when I'm in Timbuktu down in Puerto Rico, no way I can make it in 24 hours. That just wouldn't happen. And I schedule a lot of my projects based on my meetings in the city, my meetings with my constituents, my meetings around here. If I happen to need to be elsewhere for a call meeting, I would like to add another segment to that would allow us to participate in that meeting. And the couple of ideas I came up with is that calling in, and I think we had a phone here, or video teleconference. I mean, you know, everybody's got Skype or Tango or some other names out there. I can't rattle them all down. But just to bring in that added value to such last-minute meeting, I think these provisions ought to be considered as part of that, the change. And again, I like the email, we use it all the time, and the last thing I'll say on stuff is when that email is sent, it has to have a very well specific set of values, as it was reading through this, that indicates that this meeting is dealing with a specific something, and
Your charter state law requires that. If you have a special call meeting, which is what this is designed to do, you have to give notice of the subject matter of the meeting and the call. That's required.
correct. I mean, that to be added to the email message. Not,
Right.
in other words, I don't want to get a message from the mayor saying, well, tomorrow we have an exec, whatever, meeting, you know, 24 hours advance. It has to have some sort of formality behind it.
That's what this is. This is the formal process of the call of the meeting. It already has to have what you just described in it.
Okay.
The telephonic meeting process, that would not be something that would be in this section in order to authorize or require attempts to involve. But I believe there's a case on point that says you really can't have a meeting telephonically. You have to be present in order to vote.
There's specific, if you're assigned overseas, there are specific exceptions. to that.
Right,
Yes.
right. So I'll take a look at that. That wouldn't be in this provision anyway, but I will take a look.
I'm not saying about vote, I'm saying about attending the meeting.
Yeah.
I understand the voting process.
I think there's a place where that would go, and we may be able to do that by ordinance change rather than by charter change.
But then the purpose of requiring, and the charter requiring personal notification was so that you couldn't call a meeting when someone was out of town. And so if you're allowing email notification, you could arguably call a meeting when someone's out of town, and then if they can't participate, you know, they can listen in, but they can't vote, then that doesn't solve the
I
problem.
mean, you can do it by telephone under this one, so, I mean, it wouldn't.
Right, but if
it-
you do
it-
email,
it-
they
it-
may be out of town, Councilman Sabag may be.
If you telephone them, they may be out of town. That was not an exception to the notification.
Right, but you had to actually speak to him on the telephone, so if he's out of town, he doesn't necessarily answer the telephone, then there's no personal notice, it has to be personal notice.
Right, but I think this is to amend, to add what is, as you know, the Supreme Court standard for notification of things. I mean, it's one that they've adopted for their own email notification. And it makes it where it's like mail delivery, the point you get it, and so.
But my point is, if they're out of town and you notify them by email, the point, the protection was that everyone had, we are a representative body, and all of our constituents have a right to be heard through our representation. So it's not fair to call a meeting that someone doesn't necessarily get notice of. So someone could be out of town and receive, as long as the email's sent, there doesn't have to be a return receipt in the way you drafted that, as long as the email's sent. So someone may not be able to change their plans, somebody may not actually read the email until the meeting is called, because it's only requiring a 24-hour notice. So if you're going to add email as a notification, I think the 24-hour notice needs to be changed as well. I don't think that gives someone adequate time if they are not available for that meeting to make arrangements.
This pretty much parallels what the United States Supreme Court does.
Just the method. What the mayor was talking about is the time period for notification. It's not the method of notification.
What's our
it's the
current time?
It's 24 hours in advance. And so that would be up to y'all. If y'all want to change that, it's your call.
I'm speaking from experience, and many of you here in the room knows a little bit about my travels there. Even if I happen to be in South Carolina for whatever, I mean, that's cutting it, still cutting it close.
Well, it could happen to any of us.
Right, so I'm saying, this is, I'm saying.
Everybody's on the same playing field.
Correct, so I'm saying that, for me personally, I'm telling you from experience, I understand a lot of folks also happen to have similar situations. So the 24-hour email message notification would be too short of a notice, and often where I am or where some people are, maybe in a dead zone area anyway with their cell phones, do not link up to some of these cellular signals that broadcast. And we have problems on the highway with that. So the point is that we probably need to do two things: get that phone call in and expand the 24-hour period.
I'm okay with it, because I mean, how often do we do stuff like that? And we probably all gonna know what's gonna happen anyway when we decide to do it. So, I think, personally, I don't have any issues with it.
Mayor, what time frame are you looking at? What would you like?
I don't know, I haven't looked at what other cities do. I know that other cities have a longer notification period, and I'd like to look and see what the standard is before we look at the 24 hours.
That would be obviously a change to the current ordinance, but it has to come back to you guys it has to be advertised to get the form approved, and then there's a notification period. So if it's okay, it doesn't sound like the language of the email notification is causing anybody problems, so I'll prepare the charter change consistent with that, and then y'all can add a different time period when it comes up for read if you choose to do that. Nothing is happening tonight that's going to set that, but y'all will have another shot.
Currently states 24 hours. How
Yeah.
is this any different than a 24-hour phone call?
Well, that's the part, that's the logical part, there's not a difference. I guess the difference is,
In a 12-phone call, you know you're getting the telephone call. What if you get an email if you send the email at 7 a.m. and I don't check my email until 7 p.m., the email is considered, the notice is considered sent as soon as the email is sent, regardless if I read it or not. So that may not give me enough time if I'm out of town. I mean, 24 hours telephone call may not give me enough time either, but there's more of a chance that it's sitting there in my inbox and I'm not reading
If you
it.
get a phone call, if somebody calls you and you don't get the call,
No, because in our current ordinance, you have to actually speak to someone.
that's
It
what I'm
can't just be a
saying.
missed
That's what I'm
phone
saying.
call.
So if you get a phone call and you don't answer the phone because you're out of range, then that eliminates that. The 24 hours doesn't start.
Right.
So if you have a provision for email with a requirement for a response,
I think that just complicates matters, though.
There are areas in the United States, I'm sure you're aware of, that do not have proper coverage at all. So you can take your laptop and sync in to whatever signal that you got with an air card. And after many trials, you may be able to get a little bit of a connection. And during that time, you may not even get all the emails synced to your laptop at that point. So it's a struggle often, and I can assure you, I've been through that many times through my travels. And I had to drive down the hill into a town where there is signal to be able to.
if you don't respond, it's the same as an answer phone call.
So what if you're in
South Dakota. And I call you on your cell phone, you answer your phone. I mean, what's the difference between that notification or an email notification? It's still, you're still in South Dakota, it's still 24 hours. I mean, it looks like, I don't understand what the objection to is getting an email, you're still gonna have the same
No,
problem,
we're not
right?
objecting, we're not objecting on the email, we're objecting about the time period of the email.
But that's what we're doing, saying right now, if you're in North Dakota, and I call you, and I say, we'll have a meeting tomorrow night, you're in North Dakota.
Correct.
You either are or you're not gonna make it.
That's
right?
fine, that's taken care of, I got that.
Okay, so now, what's the difference between that and I send you an email today, then when I have, you're still in South Dakota?
What if I
At least
don't
at
read
the
the
time you get the phone call, if I'm in North Dakota, I have the option, if I want to get in my car and drive all night to
Well,
get there.
why
But an email, I may not read it until hours later. There's nothing to say that I'm getting that email at the time you
That's,
receive it.
that's the issue, the emails may not send. We're talking about it. That's all.
It's a fairness issue. If we want to have open and transparent government, I think we need more than
I
24
think if
hours
everybody has
notice.
to, I think if everybody has to live by the same rules, that's fair. That's what fair is. Everybody lives by the same rules. That's fair. I'm saying that we ought to live by it, but it's not fair.
We'll reconvene in just